Today, we're going to change the tire on the L39. A couple of weeks ago, I had an anti-skid failure on the jet while landing. And I didn't know that the anti-skid failed, I just knew that I had a blown tire on landing. But because of the image stabilization, you can't really appreciate how much the airplane was shaking. If you look at the bottom right of the video, you can see the stick and my helmet shaking. It was pretty violent. I was lucky to keep it on the runway. Nothing was damaged on the airplane. It's not a technically difficult job. It's a little bit physically tough, and it certainly helps if you have another pair of hands. So today, I brought my son Will to help me change this tire. First thing we're going to do is cut the safety wire and break the center bolt on the wheel that holds the wheel on. Next thing you want to do is break the center hub bolt with this special spanner wrench. And we'll do this before we get the airplane on jacks, just to make it easier. And while this bolt is tight, it's not as tight as it could be for its size. All right, so that bolt is loose. And then the other thing, of course, before we jack the airplane, we want to make sure that there's hydraulic pressure, and we either set the park and brake or we chock the other wheel so that the jet doesn't move when it's on the jack. Jet's pretty heavy. This jack point is right behind the flap, and it's probably 3,000-ish pounds on that jack point, so we want to make sure that it's blocked and doesn't move while we're working. All right, we've got our blocks in place to get our jack lined up, and Will's going to lift. Running?
Yep.
All right, now we've got the airplane on the jack. We've got the jack secure so that it can't slide. And we're going to take out the center hub nut and washer, and we'll set that aside for now. And then the wheel will come straight off. And this is with the park and brake set. And we'll take this over to the workbench to service. It's critical that before you do anything to one of these tires, you actually deflate it. Loosening the hub bolts on the hub on an aircraft tire has killed more than one mechanic, so we want to make sure that the tire is completely deflated, because right now it's a huge hazard. So we're going to take the valve cap off with a 3/8, and then we're going to use our stem removal tool, which you can buy at any auto parts store, to take out the center of the Schrader valve. And we want to make sure that thing doesn't fly across the room, because they will do that. And then once the tire is completely deflated, we'll start loosening the hub bolts. There it is. The wheel has 12 bolts that hold it together. The head has a special shape that sits in a recess on the inside of the wheel. This head prevents the bolt from turning as you loosen the nut. Next, we need to break the bead off the hub. This is the worst part of the entire job. The tool is a little bit unwieldy, and the wheel with the tire on it is very heavy. This is a bead breaker that we got from Harbor Freight, and with a little bit of modification, it worked fine to remove the bead. It helped that the tire was relatively new, and with a little bit of continuous pressure, we could get the bead to slide down the hub. All right, we got the bead broken, hub coming out, and onto the workbench. The other half of the hub on the L39 is this ring. One of the common hardware features on this aircraft is the lock nut mechanism. These nuts have a slot in the side, and if you crimp that slot to close it, it creates binding in the threads. This obviates the need for a lock washer. Even though these bolts are under a lot of tension when the tire is inflated, this thread binding prevents the nut from loosening. Next, we're going to pull the O-ring out. We're going to do it with either a pick or the dull end of a blade here, so that we're not going to reuse this O-ring. This one actually has a little damage, which is probably why it was leaking. But we'll put some Dow 4 on here as we re-lubricate the new O-ring. So now we're just going to clean up the hub, and then we'll reassemble it. So to get the tire compressed on the wheel, it's too springy to do it by hand. So a lot of shops will have this tool. I made this tool. This will actually allow you to compress the tire to seat the hub. And to get the bolt holes lined up, you can actually put a couple of the bolts in the slots backwards just to get the holes lined up until you compress, and then start a couple bolts and then do your opposite pattern to tighten it. And of course, one other thing that I should mention, on all aircraft tires, there's a red spot indicating the heavy spot on the tire, and that should line up with the red, should be red dot on the hub. All right, so here's the hub on the tool to compress with our O-ring, new O-ring seated with some DC4. And next thing we're gonna do is bead sealer on the beads, drop the tire, drop the hub, and then we'll tighten it as described. All right, now we're going to put our valve core back in and retorque the tire bolts to 35 Newton meters. One thing to be pretty careful on the L39, like some other large airplanes, I know TBM does this, the brake system has a key index and the wheel has slots for the key. So you have to make sure to line it up. If you don't, it'll rock on the wheel when you hit the brakes and it'll actually damage your wheel hub. Actually, you know what? All right, we've got our wheel clocked to the brake and all the grease back in the bearings. And right now we're preparing our safety wire, which on the L39 washer, on the wheel washer, it goes through the back of it, through that hole you see right there. And this washer has locking teeth. So Will's gonna go ahead and get that through the back. Yep.
I see.
So this is what it will look like as you're getting the wheel hub, the wheel nut back on. The safety wire will be sticking out here to the side. And we're gonna get that hand tight. So we're gonna make the hub snug, not crazy tight, but what we don't want is any lateral play in the wheel. All right, last thing we're gonna do on the securing the wheel is the safety wire. So this, remember, it's under the washer, so we're just gonna spin it and pull it around to one first or second hole on the axle nut, and then we'll spin it again. And I like, I'll probably go to that hole. And in case I didn't say it on the other video, the safety wire on the wheel is an absolute pre-flight item, because if this axle nut becomes loose, you will lose your wheel. All right, next thing we're gonna do is just drop our jack. So we're gonna loosen our All right, last part here is detailing. So thanks, Will, for getting the grease and making that tire look shiny. And that is it. That's how you change a tire on the L39. That took us about 1 hour and 20 minutes.